This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com. Of course, follow us on Instagram at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by cinematographer Benji Bakshi, whose work includes Bone Tomahawk, Prodigal Son, and more recently, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, just to name a few. Welcome to the show.
Hey, Gordon. Thanks for having me.
I guess my first question is, you joined Star Trek in season 2. So how did you get involved with the show? Like, how did you get brought on?
Totally. Well, I had began watching reruns of Star Trek Next Generation basically early on in my childhood. So I was always familiar with Trek and found that it had a really deep philosophy that stayed with me. I was watching these reruns, so compared to contemporary shows at the time, I felt like I was seeing things that were a little bit dated in their style, but the logic and the philosophy and the storytelling really stuck with me, and it sort of became a very quintessential sci-fi go-to for me. So I was really familiar with the franchise, and it was through my agent, Tara Cromer, who has done really great networking for me and brought in a lot of interesting opportunities. I heard of this show, Strange New Worlds, and because season 1 hadn't aired yet, at first I saw it and immediately thought, is this Star Trek Discovery? And it said Strange New Worlds, and I thought, oh my gosh, this is another show. What's this? So I got access to read a script and see some of the early season 1 footage, which basically was a lot of the live action with almost no visual effects, which was interesting. But I saw a very different show compared to some of the earlier, or some of the more contemporary Discovery and Picard and things like that, which are serialized and a little bit more darker and dramatic. So this had a lot more humor and was upbeat, and it was episode of the week. And I thought, this reminds me of Next Generation or some of the older shows I used to watch. So skip forward to I'm having a meeting with Chris Fisher, who's the producing director, and also Glenn Keenan, who was a cinematographer on Discovery and did the pilot for Strange New Worlds and a lot of season 1 and was continuing on into season 2. So they had the workflow and had learned a lot of lessons season 1, and they're looking for somebody to collaborate with season 2. So we just got to talking, and I have a background in music and also science. I dabbled in wanting to be a physicist at one point and decided that I really liked telling stories about science more than actually doing the science. So this became a really great fit for me, and we just hit it off.
I've been a camera person for 30 years, and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France, and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Now, I do have to ask, because when I was doing research on this and the bio that was sent over, you guys used AI in prepping for this, or how did they get involved, or how did you utilize it?
The topic of AI, I mean, the show doesn't utilize AI in any official way. As you know, it's available for really anybody to use, especially like the imaging and things like that. So I utilize AI from a sort of inspiration standpoint, and
Mhm.
was able to, we have concept artists and we have a whole art department that is using their minds to create the worlds and base it on the script, and that takes a lot of sensitivity. So that's being done by people, and my opinion is those things will never go away, but we have these new visualizing tools that can approximate, or like I said, inspire, and lead you down a path to get a better feel for what the something conceptual might be. So since we build all these worlds months in advance,
Yeah.
start to build them months in advance of production, these strange new worlds that we use on the volume or the AR wall, it's difficult for me as a cinematographer to get a sense of, if I'm looking at a 3D render or a concept art, what's a person going to look like in there? And
Mhm.
what kind of mood or tone should we create? Because we have the choice of what kind of time of day it will be, or what the overall mood or lighting should be from the world, whether it's an interior or an exterior or something in space. So I get a chance to, using AI, kind of like try to put a person in an environment and see the lighting feedback. And to me, it's almost like doing a camera test, if you will. But these are rough, and they inspire me to the point of being able to give feedback and inform the discussion that we're already having
Mhm.
about maybe which direction we should go. So instead of guessing, it gives me a chance to really feel more secure about what feels right.
Well, it's interesting because it makes me think like a lot of cinematographers I talk to will have lookbooks or have, a collection of images, and now it's just an extra tool that
It
we can
is, yeah,
draw.
and we're always pulling from inspiration of the past too. I don't think you can really get around, storytelling is a very forward moving process, both for creators and the audience.
Mhm.
But this is just a new tool for imagining, you know.
Each episode in Star Trek feels very much like its own short film. Was that intended? How did you and the DP team sort of figure out to approach this in the series?
Absolutely. That was one of the things that excited me about the show as I was considering working on it. I love the idea of having distinct stories as much as possible, and I came from feature filmmaking. So I this is, not my first television show, but it is unique in the sense that the episodes stand alone. You
Mhm.
don't really have to watch them in sequence. So that was very refreshing to have the episode of the week vibe. Of course, if you watch in series in sequence, you can follow the characters' arcs and interpersonal relationships and things like that. Um, but to me, it's the whole beauty of this series is we get to sort of start from scratch. There's certain parts of the
Mhm.
ship that may generally look the same based on a, peacetime uh story, but that's not always the case. Sometimes there's a red alert, or there's a power problem in the ship,
Yeah.
or something's going awry, or they're in different places. So we really try to imagine them with a blank slate and let the script tell us what to do. And we're encouraged to let the ship be, as we call it, the mood board of the episode as much as possible.
Yeah. And you guys don't, just to make sure, when they do get attacked, you don't shake the camera like they used to and
Yeah,
everyone go like this.
sometimes we do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We either do that manually, or
Yeah.
we have, remote controlled camera heads
Oh,
that can be
interesting.
programmed to like do stuff.
Wow.
Sometimes they will do it in visual effects,
Yeah.
but sometimes we don't.
Now you guys shoot on the volume here in Toronto. Um, so I'm wondering, because you have this history of working on sets and working on locations, what is like how has the volume changed your approach to cinematography for you personally?
Um, we can freeze time at the perfect time of day. um, there's a good example of that um, in episode 4 of season 2. They
Mhm.
go to this snow world Rigel 7, which was actually established in the very first episode of Star Trek ever, in the pilot, which then became 2 episodes that were aired.
Mhm.
We plan to do a mix of the AR wall for some of the scenes, and then go to a physical location to do a scene where they're basically working in a lumber yard.
Yeah.
And it became tricky for us to try to manage that location. We were concerned about the amount of daylight we would have, some of the weather elements, and also because we established Rigel 7 as having this very unusual sky, that we were
Mhm.
concerned about every time we see the sky, which you kind of want to see, it would be a visual effects shot, and would it look right? And are we sort of, shooting ourselves in the foot?
Mhm.
So we evaluated if we could put that set also on the AR wall. And it turns out that because there's a amount of work that has to be done to get a set complete and rendered in high resolution in time.
Mhm.
And the team said that we could just squeeze it in. And we were able to pull that off. So that set also got filmed on the AR wall, and it was really beneficial for us. There was a fight scene during that, just you're out there shooting, but it's temperature controlled, and you're not a bunch of snow, equipment getting stuck, and the
Yeah.
whole thing. So from a production standpoint, you're shooting on a stage, but it really doesn't feel like a stage when you step out onto these floors that are created with actual material, and you're surrounded immersively with these worlds that are moving, and they track the camera's position. So as you're moving, things are moving in 3D parallax. It's not just
Yeah.
a solid matte painting. It really feels so immersive, and it helps the actors feel like they're really there, and it looks really great on camera. So beyond the actual background that you can photograph in camera, which is a really beneficial thing for a cinematographer instead of shooting green screen, because you're getting the force feedback, and you're able to use things like a handheld camera, or really shallow depth of field, or fog, or elements in between the lens and the background, which helps sell the effect. There are things that we're used to using photographically, but with green screen, you're not able to do that. So we're putting things back in front of the camera. But beyond that, you can actually use the wall to impose lighting on your scene by putting digital shapes on the screen, and either maxing out the brightness or choosing what brightness you want, changing the color. And it's almost like you're creating a little Photoshop shape or pattern, and
Mhm.
that can be an illuminating source. So if something's off camera, you could create a gigantic soft source if that's what you wanted. And it really helps light the scene in conjunction with still putting lights on stands, because there's just a reality to things closer to the camera. You want a different lighting ratio, and you can't really get around the fact that you need something physically closer sometimes. But it's a really amazing tool. We
Yeah.
have a full ceiling that helps with reflections, and we can create lighting effects in the ceiling itself for different areas. It also helps with what's called the blend, which is the line between the physical set and the digital wall world. And you
Mhm.
want to make that area match in terms of lighting, color, and tone, what you see on the wall versus what the camera sees physically.
Interesting. But it's interesting because one of my questions was like, how do you deal with the blend? But I guess
We have an entire day that's
yeah,
dedicated for the blend. It's almost like a pre-light day, which
yeah.
is it's partially pre-light, but a lot of it is focused on let's blend these two sets together. And sometimes there's a discrepancy, like, well, the physical set won't look a certain way, so now you've got to change in the digital set or vice versa, and decide where the balance is.
What like one of the things that I found is that I think it's like Mandalorian, Star Trek, and there's a few other shows are sort of held up as like you know, this is well done volume work. And then there's others where people have made mistakes and you can sort of it doesn't feel as realistic or doesn't feel as authentic. So how did you guys, like, was there tricks or like little things that you guys figured out to make it feel so authentic? Because we have a lot of young cinematographers who watch these videos that we make.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I want to really congratulate Chris Fisher, the producing director on the show, and also the showrunners, Akiva Goldsman and Henry Alonzo Myers, who's, this is their brainchild, and they have gone as far as wanting to write scripts that are conducive for the wall, which I believe is a common thing, but they really are owning that and making the full creative team part of the process to give feedback to make sure that the worlds are going to get pulled off. And also the production designer, Jonathan Lee, and his team are really excellent at being able to work with these parameters. And that's really what it is every time you're using the film medium, you run up against a constraint or a limitation, and you sort of have to spin those into a creative solution. So, you have a limited space and the wall only works a certain way. And one of the interesting things about the wall is you can't generally shoot two cameras side by side, which is usually how we utilize two cameras or even three, because they have a field of view which is imposed digitally on the wall, and you have to shoot in either a perpendicular pattern or an opposing pattern so that those fields of view don't conflict. So all of a sudden you're turning your normal routine upside down to deal with the technology, or you only shoot one camera, which is mostly what we do. And sometimes that ends up being a benefit. Like Chris Nolan is notorious for only using one camera. So they're planning the concepts to work in a way that utilizes the wall technology the best. And we have what's called the virtual art department team, which is the production designer, all the cinematographers, the visual effects department, producing director, the writers come in to give notes and approve things as they're progressing. And we all get to weigh in every week as these things are being created. We also have like the Unreal artists working with us as well. So it's a really big creative party. And we do this a few times a week for months on a rolling basis based on which digital world is being created. And we get to watch them come to fruition, and everybody gets the chance to weigh in. So by the time we're shooting, there's no surprises. Everybody feels like they've given their feedback, and we feel like it's creating work that's some of our best because we all got to, weigh in. So I think that's really the secret. And if there's productions that aren't getting great results on the wall, it might be because that process isn't as cohesive.
Yeah. Well, and my big fear is it'll be treated like 3D was, where it's just like it's the new thing, do it, whereas it's this new powerful tool that we can use to create worlds we've never even seen, right?
Yeah, and I think some of the really powerful use is in sets that you might not consider. In fact, some of these sets in Strange New Worlds, I don't even want to give them away. I didn't realize when I saw season 1 footage, having not worked on season 1, I didn't realize that we're done on the AR wall. I thought they were just interior sets.
Wow.
So it's not just a cost saving thing. It's really a flexibility and a great filmmaking tool. So far it's opening up possibilities, and hopefully can just keep going further.
Amazing. I have one question for you, and if you don't want to answer this, we can totally skip it. But in another interview, you said that when you first got on to Star Trek, you had a bit of anxiety. And I know a lot of young people getting their start, once you get into those bigger and bigger projects, anxiety is going to work up. So I'm wondering how you tackled that and, took on this big project.
Sure. The anxiety I referenced was having too many options for because not only, I mean, the AR wall, actually, I felt right at home. I loved it.
Yeah.
And it's some of my favorite shoot days on set ever. but the actual standing sets, physical sets, there's lighting embedded into almost every surface.
Yeah.
Tables, these architectural elements which we call ribs, which kind of line the
Mhm.
sets, panels, ceilings, floors, doorways, the whole thing. And that was new for me in terms of just having so many options to work with, instead of this is a big window, let's push light through it and it can bounce off here, because everything is imagined. And if you're building a ship, why not put light in the perfect place?
Yeah.
I don't know if it totally makes sense, uh, that if you were sitting around a conference table, that light would be shooting into your face.
Yeah.
But for photographic reasons, why not?
Yeah.
So that was the challenge I had was, I love having really definitive sources and sources on camera that feel directional. And my concern was, gosh, I don't want this to feel like there's light everywhere,
Yeah.
which it is. There is light everywhere. So how do you then carve out shape with that lighting? So that took me some getting used to, having to sort of like, well, turn this on, turn that off. So I would arrive to set early every day and be there with the gaffer and the lighting team, and trying to find my own way to shoot these episodes from scratch, instead
Mhm.
of recalling a look that we'd already done, because immediately that, to me, sort of takes the creative process out of it. And we don't want to be, in some ways, like cheapening the effect by regurgitating an existing look. We
Yeah.
want to really be shooting every scene custom, and sometimes we go really dark and sometimes we don't. So in terms of how can you overcome that, I think it's really just falling back to your core and relying on your instinct and believing in that
Yeah.
how you think it should look. If you need more time to physically experiment, try to take as much of that as you can, and look at references or practice in ways that are inexpensive, whether that's using, like I reference, AI tools just to sort of like understand why you might like something.
Mhm.
And of course, looking at existing references. And also you could just like take Lego figures or something and play with small little sources and see what those things do. And you can like take a picture on your phone, especially
Yeah.
if like on a telephoto or um, you know, macro kind of scale. So there's a lot of ways you can like get used to what something will look like in advance, instead of having a crew move heavy equipment slowly and you're like, oh gosh, it's not there yet, why isn't this working?
Interesting. I think the other thing that might have given you so much light is all the white walls, because there's a lot of sets that are white and
They're white, yeah.
green.
So
Yeah.
you're absolutely right, and it's difficult to create shape on
Yeah.
those. But you know it's all a sense of what you want the story to do. And I've learned to get used to each set and what they offer, and sometimes we can really make the walls fall off if we need to, but
Mhm.
sometimes we don't have to. It's a matter of the costumes have a lot of color, so we're using color separation instead of
Yeah.
like luminance separation.
Interesting. Now I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
um Contact
Oh yeah. What
film.
is it about that show
Yeah, and
or the
really, in
movie?
a way, almost anything by Zemeckis. I think if it's on, you just kind of like sink in because the storytelling is so good. Also, for example, a pandemic guilty pleasure was I watched the entire series of Friends and Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah.
Because sometimes I don't want to think so much about something dramatic or even
Yeah.
crafted as a single camera show. Like I just kind of want to sink into pure, fast-paced comedy, situational stuff. So those are probably my guilty pleasures.
I had heard with Seinfeld that they were having trouble around 2000, like between 2010 and or 2007 and like 2012, uh, getting young people to watch it because a lot of the situations could be solved with a phone. You could just call your friend, like if they're late for the movie or they're stuck at the restaurant. they would start searching their phones to find a better restaurant or get tickets so they're not late, that type of thing.
Absolutely. I have a 4-year-old son, and every time somebody does this,
Yeah.
he's like, what is that? What, oh, this is a phone. I was like, what? That's not a phone. The phone is the square thing that you play games on.
Yeah. Today, my daughter got in the car with me, and I gave her. We have these games for road trips, and she just happened to have it with her, and she's like, "What is this?" And she pointed at it. I'm like, "That's a phone booth." And she's like, "Oh, what?" I was like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, we used to get in booths and talk."
I was just at the Hollywood Bowl, by the way, watching 2001 with a live orchestra,
Oh wow.
which was incredible. And they have booths near the restroom, and that they've converted into charging booths.
Oh, smart.
Yeah. So
Very smart. Well, thank you so much for letting me interview today.
you too. This was fun.
Thanks. And that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com and, of course, on Instagram at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.